The vet lifted the syringe, seconds away from ending the tiny puppy's pain. The woman holding him couldn't stop crying, whispering, "Please, don't let him suffer." The room was silent. Everyone knew this was goodbye. The German Shepherd puppy let out one weak breath, then wrapped his tiny paw around her arm, as if begging her not to let go. The vet froze mid-motion. Then beep, the heart monitor flickered. Beep, beep. The lifeless puppy's heartbeat was coming back. "This isn't possible," the vet gasped, eyes wide. Within seconds, chaos erupted as nurses rushed in. What they discovered moments later would shock everyone in that room, because that dying puppy wasn't saying goodbye. He was fighting to live. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The morning sky was heavy with clouds, the kind that made everything feel slower, quieter, sadder. Emily gripped the steering wheel with trembling hands as rain tapped gently against the windshield. In the passenger seat, wrapped in a soft blue blanket, lay Max, her 3-month-old German Shepherd puppy. His breathing was faint, shallow, and uneven, every rise and fall of his chest a painful reminder that time was slipping away. Her heart ached at the sight of him. Just weeks ago, he had been a ball of energy, chasing butterflies in the garden, tugging at her shoelaces and curling beside her on the couch after long days. Now he could barely lift his head. Emily reached over, brushing a hand through his fur. "Hang in there, buddy," she whispered, voice cracking. "We're almost there." The vet clinic came into view, a small building at the end of the street, its windows glowing faintly in the misty light. Emily parked and took a deep breath, but her body refused to move. The thought of walking through those doors felt unbearable. She had spent the entire night awake, pacing, crying, praying for a miracle. But the moment she saw the clinic sign, reality hit her like a wave. This might be the last ride they ever took together. Max let out a faint whimper, his paw twitching beneath the blanket. Emily's tears blurred her vision. She quickly wiped them away and forced a smile. "You're my brave boy," she murmured, trying to sound strong for him. Opening the door, the cold morning air bit at her cheeks as she gently lifted him into her arms. His body was warm but weak, his head resting limply against her shoulder. Inside, the receptionist looked up and immediately understood. "Dr. Harris will see you right away," she said softly, eyes filled with sympathy. Emily nodded, unable to speak. The quiet hum of the clinic machines, the faint smell of antiseptic, and the distant barking of other dogs all seemed to fade away. As she sat in the waiting area, rocking Max gently, her mind replayed every memory. His first bark, his first bath, the way he'd always wait by the door when she came home. And now, as the vet's door opened, her chest tightened with one desperate thought. Please, don't let this be goodbye. Dr. Harris entered the examination room with the calm professionalism that came from years of experience, but even he hesitated when he saw Emily's tear-streaked face and the fragile puppy in her arms. "Let's take a look at him," he said softly, motioning toward the table. Emily gently laid Max down, her fingers still brushing his fur as if afraid he'd slip away the moment she let go. The vet placed a stethoscope against Max's chest. The rhythmic sound he expected wasn't there, just weak, irregular thuds. His brow furrowed. He adjusted the scope, checked again, then sighed quietly. "Emily," he began, his tone careful. "His heart rate is dangerously low. I need to run some quick tests to confirm what's going on." Minutes stretched like hours. The soft hum of machines filled the air, each beep echoing louder than the last. Emily's heart pounded as she watched the vet review the screen. She could see the truth written on his face before he even spoke. "It's not good," he said gently. "Max's organs are failing. His body is shutting down." Emily blinked, disbelief flooding her. "There has to be something, medicine, surgery, anything," she pleaded. Her voice trembled with desperation. Dr. Harris removed his glasses, eyes filled with empathy. "I wish there were. We've tried every treatment possible. His body isn't responding anymore. He's in pain, Emily, and he's fighting to stay awake only because of you." Her breath hitched. She looked at Max, who weakly lifted his eyes toward her, tail flicking once before going still again. The realization hit her like a knife. He wasn't just sick. He was dying. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, "I promised I'd protect you." Dr. Harris placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You did. You gave him love, a home, and more happiness than most dogs ever know. Sometimes, love means letting go. The room fell silent except for the faint beeping of the monitor. Emily nodded slowly, heart breaking with every word. Outside, rain continued to fall against the window, steady and unrelenting, like the world itself was mourning with her. Emily's mind drifted back to the day she first met Max, a rainy afternoon 6 months ago that had changed her life. She had been walking home from work, umbrella barely holding against the downpour, when she heard a faint whimper coming from a cardboard box near a dumpster. Curiosity turned to horror when she saw a tiny, soaked German Shepherd puppy curled inside, trembling, his fur matted and his eyes dull with exhaustion. He looked up at her with a helpless expression, too weak to bark. Something inside Emily broke. She dropped her umbrella, ignoring the rain, and scooped him into her arms. "Hey, little one," she whispered, shielding him with her coat. "You're safe now." The puppy pressed against her chest, letting out the softest sigh, a sound she would never forget. That night, she wrapped him in a towel, dried his fur, and fed him warm milk with a dropper. He was frail, barely clinging to life, but when she set him beside her bed, he managed to crawl closer and rest his tiny head on her hand. From that moment on, she knew she couldn't let him go. She named him Max, short for Miracle, because that's what he was, a second chance at happiness after years of loneliness. Every morning he'd follow her around the house, his tail wagging like a banner of joy. He loved chasing fallen leaves, barking at butterflies, and curling up beside her when the world outside felt too heavy. Emily smiled faintly through her tears as the memories flooded back. Max had healed her in ways she never thought possible. After losing her parents, she had shut herself away from the world. But this little dog had dragged her back into life, one paw at a time. And now, sitting in the sterile clinic room watching him struggle for breath, she realized how deeply their souls had intertwined. He wasn't just her pet. He was her family, her reason to keep going. Her hand tightened around his paw as she whispered, "You saved me once, Max. I wish I could save you now." The soft hum of the clinic's fluorescent lights filled the silence. Emily sat motionless beside the examination table, her fingers tracing circles on Max's fur. He was resting now, his breathing shallow, each exhale a fragile whisper against the cold air. Dr. Harris stood quietly by the counter, the weight of years of similar moments etched across his face. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "Emily, I think it's time." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Emily's chest tightened. She looked down at Max, his eyes half open, gazing up at her with that same unbreakable trust he'd always had. "Time?" she echoed softly, as if saying it aloud might change its meaning. Dr. Harris pulled up a chair, sitting across from her. "He's in pain, Emily. His organs are shutting down. We can give him peace. No more suffering." He hesitated, giving her space to process it. But inside, Emily's heart was screaming. Peace? How could she give him peace when it meant losing him forever? Tears blurred her vision as she cradled Max's head in her hands. "I can't," she whispered. "He's my baby, my whole world." Her voice cracked under the weight of those words. Dr. Harris nodded slowly. "I know, it's the hardest choice any of us ever make." For a long moment, there was only silence. The rain outside had slowed to a drizzle, the soft patter matching the quiet rhythm of her tears. She looked at Max again, his eyes glassy but calm, his tiny paw twitching as if he wanted to comfort her. He seemed ready, even if she wasn't. Finally, through trembling lips, Emily whispered, "Okay. Just promise he won't feel pain." Dr. Harris's voice was soft. "He won't." As the nurse prepared the small room for the procedure, Emily held Max close, pressing her forehead to his. "You've been so brave," she murmured. "I'll love you forever." And though her heart was breaking, deep down she knew sometimes love means letting go, even when it shatters you to pieces. The nurse led Emily down a quiet hallway to a small, softly lit room at the end. The walls were painted a warm beige and a single lamp glowed in the corner, casting a gentle golden hue over the space. A small table stood in the middle, covered with a clean white blanket. There was no sound, no barking, no chatter, just a heavy stillness that pressed against her chest. Emily carried Max in her arms like something fragile that could crumble at any moment. His head rested limply against her shoulder, his fur still warm, his breath faint but steady. She sank into the chair beside the table, refusing to let go. The nurse offered her a box of tissues, then quietly slipped out, closing the door behind her. For a long moment, Emily simply held him. The world outside that room didn't exist, no noise, no movement, no time. She could only hear the faint rhythm of his heart against her chest, slowing with every beat. "It's just us now," she whispered, brushing her tears from his face. "Like it's always been." Her gaze fell on the soft blue blanket she had wrapped him in that morning, the same one she'd used the night she found him trembling in the rain. It had become his safe place, his comfort. Now it felt like a final goodbye. She tucked it gently around him, smoothing the edges like a mother swaddling her child. Dr. Harris entered quietly, his expression tender. He set his kit down and spoke softly. "Take your time. There's no rush." Emily nodded, her throat too tight for words. She looked down at Max, whose eyes fluttered open just enough to meet hers. In that gaze was everything: trust, love, and a silent goodbye. Her tears fell freely now, landing on his fur. She kissed his head and whispered, "You were my miracle, Max. Thank you for loving me." Outside the room, the rain began again, soft, steady, endless. Inside, Emily clung to her puppy one last time, her heart breaking in a silence too deep for words. Emily's hands trembled as she adjusted the blanket around Max, her fingers brushing through his soft fur one last time. The vet stood nearby, syringe in hand, eyes lowered in quiet respect. The air was heavy, so still it felt sacred. Emily bent down, pressing her forehead gently against Max's. "It's okay, baby," she whispered through her tears. "You can rest now." Max let out a faint, tired sigh. His chest rose weakly, then fell. For a moment, Emily thought he was already gone, but then, with what little strength he had left, he moved. His paw twitched, lifted shakily, and came to rest against her wrist. Slowly, weakly, he wrapped it around her arm as if hugging her goodbye. The vet froze. The nurse's breath caught. Time itself seemed to stop. Emily's sob broke the silence. "Oh, sweetheart," she cried softly, clutching his paw against her chest. It was the gentlest hug, yet it carried the weight of everything they'd ever shared, every walk, every laugh. Every night he'd curled beside her when she was lonely. Dr. Harris swallowed hard, his voice barely above a whisper. "He's holding on. For you." Emily looked into Max's fading eyes, her heart shattering under the tenderness of that moment. "You don't have to be strong anymore," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'll be okay, I promise." A tear slipped down her cheek and landed on his nose. He blinked once, his tail giving the faintest twitch as if saying, "I know." The vet stepped forward gently. "Are you ready?" Emily nodded, though her lips trembled with the lie. "Yes." Let him go peacefully. As the needle approached, Max didn't flinch. His paw remained wrapped around her arm, his tiny heartbeat pressed close to hers. Emily felt him take one last slow breath, and then for a moment complete stillness. The vet lowered his head in silence. Emily's tears fell freely now, her hands still holding that tiny paw frozen in its final embrace. The room was silent, but that small hug would echo in her soul forever. The room was still. Emily sat frozen, her hands trembling as she held Max's lifeless paw. Dr. Harris slowly withdrew the syringe, his voice soft, respectful. "He's at peace now," he said quietly. But Emily couldn't move. The silence pressed against her like a weight. The world outside that tiny room disappeared. No ticking clock, no footsteps in the hall. Just the unbearable stillness of goodbye. She stroked his fur gently, her tears falling onto his paw. "I love you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I always will." But just as she leaned closer to kiss his head one last time, a faint, unexpected sound made her freeze. Beep. Emily's eyes widened. The faint tone came again, beep, beep, from the heart monitor beside the table. Dr. Harris turned sharply, disbelief flashing across his face. "That's impossible," he muttered, rushing toward the screen. The line that had gone flat moments ago now flickered, weakly but unmistakably alive. Emily's heart leapt into her throat. "What's happening?" she gasped. Dr. Harris's hands moved quickly, checking the wires, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. "His heart rate, it's rising!" The nurse stepped closer, eyes wide. Did the injection not? No, Dr. Harris cut in, shaking his head. It was the sedative dose, not the final one. I hadn't administered it yet. He stared at the monitor, his voice trembling. But this shouldn't be happening. Not like this. Emily leaned over Max, her tears replaced with stunned disbelief. His chest moved slightly, just a twitch, but it was real. Max, she whispered. His paw shifted, barely brushing her sleeve. The air in the room changed, like the space itself was holding its breath. Dr. Harris placed a hand against Max's ribs, feeling the faint rhythm beneath his palm. His eyes widened. There's something else going on, he said urgently. Something we missed. Emily clutched Max's paw tighter, her voice breaking between hope and fear. He's fighting, she whispered. He's still fighting, and for the first time that morning, the word goodbye didn't feel final anymore. Dr. Harris's heart pounded as he leaned over the table, his trained eyes scanning the monitors in disbelief. The rhythmic beeping grew steadier, faint but real, proof that Max's tiny heart was still fighting. This doesn't make sense, he muttered under his breath, adjusting the sensors. His vitals were collapsing minutes ago. The nurse stood frozen beside him, hand over her mouth. Is he coming back? She whispered. Emily could barely breathe. Her tears hadn't stopped, but now they carried something different. Hope. Please, she said softly, voice trembling. Please don't stop trying. Dr. Harris quickly grabbed his stethoscope and pressed it to Max's chest. What he heard made him frown. It's erratic but strong, he murmured. There's something triggering these fluctuations. He motioned for the nurse. Get me an ultrasound scanner now! Within seconds, the small device was in his hands. He applied gel and moved the probe gently across Max's abdomen, eyes fixed on the flickering image that appeared on the screen. For a moment, there was only static and noise. Then, something caught his attention. A faint, irregular shadow pulsed near the heart. Not a tumor. Not fluid. Something lodged. His eyes widened. That's it, he breathed. There's an obstruction pressing against the cardiac tissue. Emily blinked, confused. An obstruction? You mean something stuck inside him? Dr. Harris nodded quickly, his mind racing. Yes, and if it's pressing on the heart, that could explain everything. The collapse, the shallow breathing, even the false signs of death. He turned to the nurse. We need to act now. Prep the surgical bay. Emily's pulse quickened. Surgery? But he's so weak. The vet met her eyes firmly. If we don't operate immediately, he won't make it. But if we do... He hesitated, glancing at the monitor, where the heartbeat still fluttered like a faint spark refusing to die. He might just have a chance. Emily nodded, tears streaming anew. She kissed Max's head gently and whispered, Fight, baby. Just one more time. And with that, the room burst into motion, hope rushing in where despair had once lived. The surgical room buzzed with urgency. Stainless steel trays gleamed under the bright lights as nurses hurried to prepare instruments. Dr. Harris pulled on his gloves, his expression tense but focused. Emily stood outside the glass window, hands pressed to the pane, her eyes locked on the small table where Max lay surrounded by machines and monitors. His tiny chest rose and fell with fragile rhythm, the heart monitor beeping in stubborn defiance of fate. Scalpel, Dr. Harris said calmly, though his voice carried the edge of adrenaline. The nurse handed it to him without hesitation. He made a small, precise incision near Max's chest, his eyes narrowing as he worked. Minutes passed in heavy silence, every sound amplified, every second stretching into eternity. Careful, murmured one of the assistants. He's fading. I know, Harris replied, his tone clipped but steady. His gloved hands moved delicately, tracing the source of the obstruction shown on the ultrasound. And then he saw it. Something small and irregular wedged dangerously close to the heart. There, he breathed. That's what caused it. He carefully used forceps to extract a tiny shard, barely the size of a fingernail, glistening under the light. For a moment, everyone froze. What is that? The nurse asked softly. Harris examined it closely. A splintered piece of bone, he said, astonished. Probably from one of his chew toys. It must have lodged in the wrong place and caused a severe infection that spread internally. Emily gasped when she saw the vet hold it up. He's been in pain this whole time because of that? Harris nodded grimly. Yes, but now that it's out, his body has a fighting chance. He quickly stitched the small incision closed, his movements precise and practiced. "Let's stabilize him," he ordered, his voice finally carrying a note of hope. Outside the window, Emily pressed her palms together, whispering through her tears. "Please, Max, please stay with me." As the monitor steadied and the heart rate strengthened, a hush fell over the room. For the first time in hours, Dr. Harris allowed himself a small, relieved smile. "He's not gone," he said quietly. "Not yet." The atmosphere inside the operating room shifted from tense silence to sheer determination. Every second mattered now. "Heart rate at 42 and climbing," the nurse announced, eyes glued to the monitor. Dr. Harris nodded, his brow slick with sweat beneath the surgical light. "Keep the oxygen steady," he instructed. "We can't afford another drop." Emily stood outside, watching through the glass, her chest tight with fear. The faint rhythm of the heart monitor echoed through the hallway, each beep like a fragile promise that her puppy was still fighting. She pressed her hand to the window. "Come on, Max," she whispered, voice cracking. "You can do this." Inside, Dr. Harris worked quickly. He cleaned the surrounding tissue, checking for any further damage. "There's inflammation here," he said. "We'll need antibiotics immediately after surgery." The nurse nodded, preparing an IV line as the vet carefully placed the final sutures. Max's breathing hitched, shallow but present. "Vitals stabilizing," another nurse called out. "Pressure holding." Relief flickered across Dr. Harris's face, but he didn't relax. "We're not out of danger yet," he said quietly. "He's exhausted. If his heart gives out again before we close, he won't make it." The team moved in rhythm, their motions synchronized like clockwork. The faint hum of machines filled the room, blending with the soft rhythm of hope. Then suddenly, beep, beep, beep. The heart monitor spiked erratically. "We're losing him." Adrenaline surged.
"Increase oxygen flow,"
Dr. Harris barked. "Prepare epinephrine now." The nurse moved fast, handing him the syringe. He injected the dose directly into the IV port, his hands steady despite the pressure. For a few agonizing seconds, there was no response. Emily's tears blurred her vision. "Please," she whispered, "don't take him away." Then beep, 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 beep. The rhythm steadied. The room exhaled collectively. Dr. Harris lowered his shoulders, a faint smile breaking through the exhaustion. "He's back," he murmured. "He made it through the worst." Emily collapsed to her knees outside the glass, sobbing with relief. Inside the room, Max's small body rose and fell with fragile breaths, proof that even the tiniest hearts can fight the hardest battles. The hallway outside the surgical room felt endless. Emily sat on the cold bench, her hands clasped tightly around Max's blue blanket, the one that still carried his scent. The rhythmic tick of the wall clock was the only sound in the sterile silence. Every minute stretched into eternity, each second gnawing at her hope. She kept replaying the same thought in her head. He was supposed to be gone, and yet he's still fighting. Through the small window, she could see faint movements, the silhouettes of the vet team working, the flicker of lights from the monitors. She couldn't hear them, but she didn't need to. Every glance at the glass reminded her that somewhere beyond it, her best friend was battling for his life. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer. "Please, God, don't take him from me, not yet. Not like this." Her voice trembled as she held the blanket tighter, pressing it against her heart. The memory of his last hug replayed in her mind, his paw curling weakly around her wrist, his eyes full of love even as he faded. That memory had shattered her once. Now it was the only thing keeping her strong. A nurse stepped out briefly, adjusting her mask. Emily jumped to her feet. "How is he?" she asked desperately. The nurse's eyes softened. "He's holding on. Dr. Harris is doing everything he can. Just keep praying." Emily nodded, her knees weak with relief and fear all at once. She sank back down, tears spilling freely. Around her, the clinic had gone quiet. Even the rain outside had slowed to a drizzle, as if the world itself was waiting. Time blurred. 10 minutes, 30, maybe an hour. Then the door finally opened. Dr. Harris stepped out, removing his gloves. His expression was unreadable, his face weary. Emily's breath caught in her throat. "Doctor?" she whispered, voice barely holding together. He looked at her for a long moment, then exhaled slowly. "He made it through the surgery," he said softly. "Now we wait to see if his heart stays strong." And in that fragile silence, Emily finally allowed herself to hope again. Hours later, The dim lights of the recovery ward glowed softly, casting long shadows across the quiet room. Emily sat beside Max's small bed, her hands trembling as she brushed her fingers through his fur. The rhythmic beep, beep of the heart monitor was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. He was alive. Fragile, weak, but alive. Dr. Harris stood near the foot of the bed, his expression softer than she had ever seen. "He's a fighter," he said quietly. "That little heart went through more than most animals could survive. I honestly didn't think he'd make it." Emily looked up, tears glimmering in her eyes. "You saved him," she whispered. Dr. Harris shook his head gently. "No, Emily, you did. He kept fighting because of you." His voice broke slightly, betraying the emotion behind his calm exterior. He'd seen hundreds of animals pass through his clinic, but very few stories like this, ones where love itself seemed to bend the laws of life. The nurse stepped forward with a small smile. "His vitals are stabilizing. If he keeps this up through the night, he'll be out of critical danger." Emily exhaled shakily, gripping Max's paw between her hands. "You hear that, baby?" she whispered. "You did it." Max's eyelids fluttered. For a moment, she thought it was her imagination. But then his tail moved, just a tiny twitch against the blanket. Emily gasped. "Dr. Harris!" He moved. The vet stepped closer, leaning down to check. A slow smile spread across his face. "Well, I'll be damned," he murmured. "He's waking up." Tears streamed down Emily's cheeks as she laughed through her sobs. "Hi, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice trembling with joy. "You scared me half to death." Max blinked weakly, his eyes finding hers, the same deep gaze she had fallen in love with months ago. He gave a faint sigh, resting his paw on her wrist again as if reminding her, "I'm still here." And for the first time that day, Emily truly believed in miracles. Days turned into weeks, and slowly life began to return to the quiet rhythm of hope. Max's strength grew little by little. Each morning, Emily would arrive at the clinic with a cup of coffee in one hand and his favorite chew toy in the other. She'd sit by his bed talking softly, her words weaving a comfort only he could truly understand. "You're getting stronger, aren't you, buddy?" she'd whisper, smiling through tired eyes. Max's tail wagged weakly the first time, just a faint flicker, but it was enough to make her cry. Every heartbeat, every small movement felt like a victory. Dr. Harris would peek in during his rounds, always with that quiet smile that said more than words ever could. "He's one stubborn little guy," he'd remark, adjusting the monitors. "Most dogs wouldn't have survived that trauma. But this one, he's special." Emily nodded, her gaze never leaving Max. "He always has been," she said softly. "He saved me before." "I guess he's just returning the favor." When the day finally came to remove the IV lines, the entire clinic staff gathered around. The nurse clapped her hands in excitement as Max lifted his head and gave a small bark, his first in weeks. Laughter and applause filled the room, but Emily just knelt beside him, pressing her forehead to his. "You did it, my miracle boy," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. Dr. Harris crouched beside them. "You know," he said quietly, "I've been a vet for 20 years and I've never seen anything like this. He shouldn't have survived, but he did. There's no medical explanation that fits perfectly." Emily smiled through her tears. "Then maybe it wasn't medicine," she said softly. "Maybe it was love." The vet nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. "Maybe it was." That night, as Emily carried Max home in her arms under the setting sun, she realized something beautiful. Miracles don't always come with thunder and light. Sometimes they arrive quietly, wrapped in fur, heartbeat by heartbeat. The sun was bright and gentle that morning, spilling golden light across the park's green field. Emily stood near the path, a leash in her hand, her heart fluttering with emotions she could barely contain. It had been 3 months since the surgery, 3 months of cautious recovery, sleepless nights, and endless prayers. And now finally Max was ready. The clinic doors opened and out trotted a different dog, stronger, healthier, his coat shining under the sunlight. Max paused for a moment, sniffing the air as if rediscovering the world he'd almost left behind. Then without warning he bounded forward, tail wagging furiously. Emily laughed through tears, dropping to her knees as he jumped into her arms. "You're really back," she whispered, holding him close. Max licked her cheek, his joyful bark echoing through the park. A few children nearby stopped to watch, smiling at the sight of the energetic German shepherd running freely again. Dr. Harris and his nurse stood at a distance, both smiling proudly. "He made it further than I ever imagined," the vet said quietly. "Some recoveries are science. Others, I think, are something beyond it." Emily nodded, wiping her tears. "He's my miracle," she said softly. "My second chance." Max chased a ball across the grass, his step strong and sure. For a moment, Emily just stood there watching him. The same puppy she had once carried in her arms, now running like the wind. Every bark, every leap was a reminder that miracles didn't need to be loud. They just needed love, faith, and one last fight. When Max finally returned, panting and proud, Emily knelt and cupped his face. "You showed everyone what it means to never give up," she whispered. Max pressed his head against her chest, tail thumping softly against the ground. The world around them blurred into sunlight and laughter, and for the first time in months everything felt whole again. Love had done what medicine couldn't. It had given life a second chance. The evening sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. Emily sat on her porch with Max curled up beside her, his head resting on her lap, eyes half closed in peace. The wind carried the soft hum of distant laughter and the rustle of leaves, a perfect, quiet ending to a journey that had begun in heartbreak. She looked down at Max, tracing her fingers over the faint scar on his chest. "You gave me the scare of a lifetime," she whispered with a smile. Max lifted his head slightly, his amber eyes gleaming in the fading light, and gave her hand a gentle lick. It was as if he understood. This wasn't just recovery. It was rebirth. A car pulled up outside. Dr. Harris stepped out, carrying a small envelope in his hand. "You've got mail," he said warmly, handing it to her. "It's from the hospital's charity department." Emily opened it, curious, and inside was a handwritten note. The words were simple, yet they hit deep. "To the woman with the brave dog, thank you for reminding us that miracles still exist. Love can heal what medicine cannot." Tears welled in her eyes as she looked up at the vet. He smiled softly. "You both gave us something to believe in again." Emily hugged Max closer, whispering, "You really are my angel." He let out a small huff, tail wagging against her knee. The world felt softer somehow, warmer, lighter, as if love itself had painted everything new. She looked into the camera she had set up for her YouTube audience, her voice tender but strong. "If you've made it this far," she said, "remember, never give up on the ones you love. Sometimes hope hides in the smallest heartbeat. And miracles happen when you least expect them." Her lips curved into a gentle smile as she added, "And to everyone watching, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that remind us what truly matters. Compassion, courage, and the bond that can outlast even death." As the screen faded to black, Max barked softly beside her. A perfect living reminder that love never dies,